without further ado, Jason, if you could just introduce us before we talk about some of the fun stories, just a little bit of your background and who's sitting with us this morning.
Hi, my name is Jason Grimsley. I'm from a very largely, densely populated area in East Texas, Tarkington Prairie. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but a lot of people there. I think there were 60 people in my class. Everybody knew everybody, so I got away with nothing when I was younger, which was not necessarily a bad thing. But no, he was talking about the scouts earlier. I'm from a very small community. My dad was my first baseball coach. My one grandmother was a Mormon. My other grandmother was a Baptist. And I got juggled between two different ideas as far as God goes. Never really wasn't raised in a church-going family, but knew there was God. Acknowledged that fact, but then again, Satan and demons know there's God as well, so that doesn't mean I was a follower when I was younger. And lived my life accordingly. Like he said, everybody has plans for life. I'm the first generation that's not military in my family. My grandfather was a Marine. He was in Northern Africa. My uncles were Marines. They were in Europe. My great uncle was a naval aviator. He was killed in a plane crash while he was in the Navy. So that was my dream. I was going to the Air Force. I was actually rather smart for a redneck. I was graduated towards the top of my class, and got accepted to the Air Force Academy. Had the initial visit. They came back, and we were going through the physical part of it, and failed the physical. I had a motorcycle wreck when I was 12 years old. Cut off my left big toe and part of my foot, and unbeknownst to me, the military wouldn't take me. I was considered 4F, I believe. That's the category. So dream was shattered. I had no idea what I was going to do. None whatsoever. This is the beginning of my senior year. My junior year, I played football, basketball, and baseball like everybody did back in those days. And before the baseball season, my junior year, I was able to pitch one game, and then I broke my right wrist in off-season football. So I didn't play my senior year. My junior year, the last game of basketball season, I got cut while I was going up. I broke my left wrist and hurt my right shoulder, so I didn't get to pitch my senior year. But that being said, the one game that I pitched my junior year happened to be against a larger school in Livingston, Texas. And the coach that was there, his name's Rick Lynch, ended up coming to my school my senior year to be my baseball coach because his dad was our football coach. And I was a quarterback on the football team, and he saw me pitch that one game. Well, May 28th was graduation night. Graduated, got off the stage. All the kids went to have their party. I went back home, packed a suitcase, and at about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, my baseball coach and I took off and went to Arlington, Texas, to a Philadelphia Phillies tryout camp because of the one game that he saw me throw my junior year against his team. In 7 innings, I believe I struck out 12 of them, gave up a hit, and didn't know how hard I threw, but he knew I threw pretty hard. And so we drive all night. We get there about 4 o'clock in the morning. The camp starts at 7, and the man that was running was named Doug Gasaway. He was a cross-checker for the Philadelphia Phillies, which is a higher-up scout. And so Rick went to Doug Gasaway and asked him, said, can Jason come back tomorrow? He just graduated. We got here at 4:30 in the morning. We got to bed about 5:30, 6 o'clock. He hadn't slept. And Doug Gasaway said, no, if you don't mind him coming back to face the college kids we want to take a second look at. And Rick said, no, we'd just like him to get some sleep. So went to the hotel, got some sleep, came back the next day, 7 o'clock in the morning, we're out there, and I'm in the outfield playing catch. Now, mind you, I was not in this form at that time. I was 6 foot tall, weighed about 155 pounds. I had braces on, and I looked like I was 12. I really did. If you can pitch Opie from, that was exactly what I looked like. And so I'm in the outfield playing catch, and I go to the bullpen to warm up to go onto the field. And it was at the University of Texas at Arlington, and their starting catcher from this previous season was the guy that was catching me that was going to take me on the field to face hitters. And I walk in the bullpen, and he looks at me, and he asks me, he said, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm going to go throw. And he goes, okay. So we play a little catch, and I tell him to get down, and He gets in his crouch and he puts his glove up, and I wind up and I turn it loose. His glove's up, the ball goes right by his ear. He starts laughing. He picks the ball up, he's laughing, he gets ready, he catches it, he's laughing the whole time, and I'm thinking, why is this guy laughing at me? I already feel a little self-confident. I'm 6 foot tall, 155 pounds, and got all these college kids that are basically men that are out there. And we're walking out together, and he looks at me and he goes, dude, I tell you good luck, but you don't need it. And I go, what? He goes, never mind. So I get on the mound, and there's the turtle that they hit in on the field, and batting practice is on the field. Well, at that time, Southwest Conference coach and junior college coach in Texas, there were about 15 college coaches there, and the Philly scouts were behind the turtle. And they asked me my name, and I said Jason Grimsley, and they all looked at me and went right back to looking down and talking to each other. Nobody was paying attention. So I get the ball, and I get on the mound, and I wind up, and I throw the first one, and when I turned it loose, it sounded like a howitzer went off. It just exploded. The mitt made that crack, and I noticed everybody's head stopped, and they snapped, and they looked up, and it was dead quiet. And Doug Gasaway leaned over the turtle and talked to the catcher, and the catcher was still laughing, and he shook his head yes and put his mask back on and held his glove up. Well, I come set, get ready to throw again, and I look up, and there's 15 radar guns pointed at me. I throw the next one, and before it hit the mitt, Doug Gasaway is walking out from behind the turtle, and he says, whoa, wait a minute. He says, son, where have you been? I said, Tarkington Prairie, Texas. And that began the beginning of a journey for me. I had no idea what I was going to do. I went to a tryout camp on the 28th, or the 29th, I'm sorry. On the 30th, I stepped on the mound. On June the 6th, I was drafted in the 10th round by the Philadelphia Phillies. I was the 251st player drafted. On June the 11th, I was in Bend, Oregon. Never been on an airplane before, never been away from home. And on September the 8th, 1989, I was called up to the big leagues.
Interesting. And one thing you said it's good. One thing that stood out to me in that story and kind of intro of how you got into the big leagues is that your dream was shattered going into, was it the Navy or?
Air Force.
Air Force. Your dream was shattered, but it opened up the door to something else.
It did.
And
God definitely had a different plan.
Yeah, God had a different plan. And man, I know when my dreams are shattered, you feel empty and broken, but when you trust God, He'll open the door to something else. And so what you just described with the whole tryout and the radar guns, you've lived what many men in here, what their boyhood dreams were. That's definitely the softball guys in here, right? That was what my boyhood dream was, and you've lived it. So, man, I'm going to look at my watch too, because if I could probably do this easy 6 or 7 hours, okay? But I know not everybody loves baseball as much as me. The softball guys in here probably wouldn't mind it, but we want to definitely make sure we be sensitive to everybody else. But you just said you drafted in '89. And let's talk a little bit about, you played for some various teams for 10 years, and then it landed you in New York,
Correct.
right? In '99, was it?
99.
Can you talk about that process and how, coming from a small town in Texas, and obviously you were exposed to the world those 10 years, but there's no place like New York, right?
There's no place like New York.
How was that process landing for the Yankees at the time? Man, they had just come off '96 and '98 World Series team, the best team in baseball, building this dynasty, and here you find yourself, with the greatest franchise in the history of sports. How was that process for you?
That was another just God thing. I did not know the Lord at the time. I was struggling. I'd been in the minor leagues for about 1.5 years. I got sitting down, had one of the better arms in baseball, but I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn I was just wild. I was either going to be extremely good or extremely bad. There was no gray area when I pitched. And I was up and down in minor leagues, big leagues, minor league, big leagues for those 10 years. I think I got a little over 5.5, 6 years in the big leagues in those 10 years as far as service time goes, but I spent parts of pretty much every year in the big leagues. In the 1998, I spent the entire league in the minor leagues with the Cleveland Indians. But that was when I got introduced to the bullpen. I was a starting pitcher the first part of my career. The last part of my career, I should have been in the bullpen the whole time. But it just so happened that I became the closer in AAA that year after a month in the season. And a man named Billy Connors with the Yankees, who's a really, really neat individual. I believe Billy passed this last year, if I'm not mistaken. He saw me pitch in Columbus, got a phone call, which was odd from Billy, in the winter, asking me if I would like to come to spring training with the Yankees. And at the time, I was struggling. We had 2 children, a house note, wasn't making a lot of money. Money was tight. And I said, sure, Billy. I said, but could you guys, give me $20,000 to sign? And he said, well, let me call you back. And I thought, there's no way this is going to happen. He called me back. He said, okay, we'll do it. You make the club, take it out of your big league salary. You send it to AAA, we take it out of AAA salary. If you don't make either team, you can keep the money. I said, that's great. So we showed up. I showed up 10 days early. They wanted all the new guys that they were bringing into big league camp to come early to get acclimated to being with the Yankees and learn the coaches and learn a little about it. And the first day on the mound, I made sure when I got there I was ready to go. So the first day on the mound, I'm on the mound throwing, and there was this younger catcher that was catching me. And I was throwing four-seam fastballs, curveballs, and then I told him, sinker. And I threw it, and he completely missed it. It went under his glove, and he started shaking his head, and he threw it back, and I threw another one. He missed it again. And from the corner over there, I heard Billy Connor say, hey, that's a nice split. And the catcher said, it's not a split. He said, what do you mean? He said, it's his fastball. And Billy said, what? And he ran over, he got behind me, he said, throw it again. And I threw it again, and he grabbed me by my shoulders, and he turned me around, and he said, you're not throwing a four-seam fastball, you're not throwing a changeup, you're not throwing a curveball, you're throwing that every pitch until you can throw it over the plate. I said, okay. He said, because my entire career, when I was with the Phillies, they wouldn't let me throw it because Darren Dalton couldn't catch it. And everywhere else I went, they didn't want me to throw it because they'd either box it or it'd get away from them. But Billy told me that, so that is the only pitch I threw for the next 8 years of my career.
Unbelievable. And then, so the Yankees signed you at that point?
The Yankees signed me, and that spring training, my wife was a Christian, and had been, and was just on me constantly about church. Where in my world, in my life, baseball was my God. Right. Every day I did something to get better. I was constantly working out. It was just, that was my focus. I didn't have time for anything other than baseball. Looking back on, that's probably one of the most selfish things I've ever did in my life, as along with one of the most rewarding. But there's always things you could have gone back and done a whole lot better. And there's wishes and wants, but I know it wouldn't have shaped me into the person that I am today if I hadn't gone through what I went through and came to Christ the way I did. Well, we went to an Easter vigil, an Easter ceremony, and they had the production in this church, and I'd seen it before, but it moved me that day. It touched me. I cried, and I finally said, okay, I get it, and got involved with George McGovern. And I don't know if you guys know George McGovern at all, but that man is just a blessing, not only to me and to this community, but to this entire baseball world and world in whole. He's just an incredible human being. And George started mentoring with me, and got into Bible study, got into daily devotional with Andy Pettit, Scott Brocious, Mariano, Bernie Williams, just a great group of Christians on that baseball team. And ended up making the team out of spring training. And that brought me to April 25th. Does anybody remember April 25th, 1999? Does that stick out in anybody's mind?
Opening day? No.
It was Joe DiMaggio Day. It was the day that the New York Yankees honored Joe DiMaggio. Got to wear a 5 on our shoulder the whole year. So April 25th, it was a Sunday. Wake up that morning. I meet my wife, my 2 boys, my mother-in-law, George McGovern, Scott Brocious, Andy Pettit, and Chad Curtis at the time. We all met at Lake Armonk, and George McGovern baptized me. Huh. It was just
awesome.
Incredible day. So it was April 25th. I was baptized. I get to the ballpark. It's Joe DiMaggio Day. I walk in the clubhouse, and Bernie Williams, is a really good musician.
Yeah.
He's a great guitarist. And Bernie was kind enough to start teaching me how to play the guitar. So I had my guitar and his guitar, and they were in a locker that were between ours. And I walk in, and in front of my locker and Bernie's locker, there's Bernie and this little dude is playing my guitar. And I go, all right, who's playing my guitar? You know, I'm thinking, oh, jeez, somebody's playing my guitar. You know, that's sort of rude. So I walk up there, it's Paul Simon. So I sit down and I get to play the guitar with Paul Simon.
Did you know it was them?
When I walked up, I said, yeah, then I knew it was Paul Simon.
That's
but before,
good.
no, it was just some little dude that had
Yeah.
not very good hair with a bad jacket
right,
on
right.
playing my guitar. So I sit down and I talk to Paul Simon. I play the guitar with him. So I'm just having to talk about on cloud nine. I've baptized Joe DiMaggio Day,
Yeah.
play the guitar with.
Right.
So we didn't have band practice that day, and we had all the celebrities and all the former Yankees are in the clubhouse, and Billy Crystal's in there, and he's running around talking to everybody. He's hilarious, a funny man. And he's wanting to play catch, and nobody's playing catch with him. So I just say, heck, I'll play catch with you. So I go outside, and I'm playing catch with Billy Crystal. And I'm thinking, all right, I've had a pretty dang good day so far.
Yeah. So I hadn't realized, Q, jump in anytime you want. I hadn't realized you came to Christ with the Yankees.
With the Yankees.
So, and it was Chaplain McGovern who really brought the gospel to you. Did any of the players, when you got there, and if so, who, did any of them prior to that reach out to you, or maybe like you kind of knew they were believers, or sow any seeds with you or anything like that?
Yeah, during spring training, during the whole process, yes, Andy Pettit, Scott Brocious were huge. Bernie Williams, very instrumental.
That's so refreshing to hear that stuff happens on that level.
So I play catch with Billy Crystal. So we're playing, I believe we're playing the Blue Jays. Yep, playing Toronto Blue Jays. And get the ninth innings, 2-1. We got a one-run lead. Here comes that song. Everybody knows it.
Yeah.
Enter the Sandman. Mariano's coming in. Game over. Mariano blew the only save he blew all year long. He gave up a run. So we get going to the 10th inning. I go in the game. I pitch the 10th inning and the 11th inning, and we walk off in the 11th, so I get a win. So on April 25th, 1999, I was baptized. Joe DiMaggio Day, I got to play the guitar with Paul Simon, catch with Billy Crystal, and got my first win as a Yankee.
You know, Jason, I think we all have our same story like that, right, guys? You know, but sometimes, you know, in these settings, Jason, I mean, it like Joseph, I remember being in Ohio, loving to hear the stories, and, you know, when you bring up Torre and Jeter, it just seems like a world that very, very few people get to experience. But to bring it back to Sunday morning here, it was also very, you know, for you to be so transparent in your need for God still. I mean, here's this big, tough, just, you know, amazing athlete, amazing experiences in the Major League Baseball, but then to hear someone like that need God as well. So if you don't mind, I'd love to kind of go into sharing some of your experiences, maybe some low points, maybe after transitioning from ball, and really where your faith began to deepen, and the reality of how much you needed God as well.
That 99 year was you know, I had the fuzzies, the feel-good feeling the whole time. I was on fire. My wife was actually upset with me because I was spending more time in the Bible than I was with her. And you know, you win the World Series, went on Letterman, did the top 10 list. That whole, you know, everything starts focusing on you, me, and then I started drifting further and further. The next year I got a little further away, and then, you know, just go to Bible study every once in a while, look at my Bible every once in a while. Didn't have the same passion. It was more, I was basically being selfish. I had saw God's miracles in my life to that point. There were at least 6 or 7 times that I probably should have died when I was younger. Legitimately. I got ran over on my bicycle, had the motorcycle wreck, almost bled to death. Got a life jacket stuck around my feet in a pool by myself when I was young. Don't know how I got out of that one. Many instances of 3-wheelers near misses, having wrecks at 70 miles an hour and getting up and just walking away with nothing, no scratches, anything. And I didn't see it at the time, but God was carrying me along saying, I got something better for you, I got something better for you. So I drifted away from God, and towards the end of my career, got involved in some drug issues, some alcohol issues. And then when baseball was over, I was completely lost. I didn't have a base, didn't have a foundation. Christ was no longer, it was a thought in my mind, but I didn't feel like I deserved or was worthy. I felt like a hypocrite everywhere I went. And looking back on it, I know now at the time that it was the devil banging on me, because, as long as I was doing his bidding, he didn't want anything to do with me. But as soon as I came to Christ, there was just attack after attack after attack. And ended up in a rehab in 2007. Wow. And it was not a Christ-centered thing. Didn't work that well. I was mad at the world because everybody else was having fun and I wasn't. And ended up in a psych ward a little while later. Same thing, get out, right back to the old habits. And then came to the point in my life to where basically I didn't want to exist anymore. I had given up on myself, my life, my family, everything. I was tired of the pain. I was tired of fighting with God. I was tired of living. Ended up, my cousin has a ranch and has a little bunkhouse on it. And I purposely got in a fight with my wife so I could get away from everybody, and ended up with about an ounce of cocaine and about 6 bottles of vodka. And decided that was going to be it. And in 2.5, 3 days, trying to snort myself and drink myself to death and not working, I made a decision that it was time to get it over with. So it's one of those things. There's something that's different in my brain. Never passed out, never blacked out. Remember everything. And this is one of those things you wish you could remember, but you're sort of glad you can't. I grabbed my pistol, walked out in the woods, found a place. I sat down. I cocked the gun. I turned it around. I looked at it, and I pulled the trigger. And it didn't go off. There's a safety feature on the back of a Kimber pistol. It's a pressure plate that you got to pull. That when I turned it around, I didn't have it pulled. Wow. And I didn't have the guts to do it again, I guess. But in that moment, something grabbed a hold of me, something changed. And for the next year, I struggled with almost doing what I did, and the condemnation that I felt, and the shame that I felt, and the guilt I felt for what I put my family through, my wife through, just was just weighing on me. And sat down and had a meeting with God and said, all right, I'm yours. Where do you want me to go? I'm done fighting. I surrender. And thank you. And actually got up on a stage in church. People were coming up and talking, and I was sitting with my wife, and I just got up and I stood in front of the church and said, guys, I'm struggling. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. I just know that I need God and I need y'all's help. And that started the journey, and got involved with a man named Michael Smalley. I believe his brother's with Focus on the Family. And he's been a big influence and a great mentor. And then after a little while, I got a call from George McGovern to go to Athletes in Action, and jumped at the chance and went and got connected with a man named Ronnie Iosa, obviously Q, a few other guys, and got involved with Joe Pellegrino, who wrote the 7 Pillars of Men, and began talking with him. And decided then and there that I'm going to get out and I'm going to share with people what Christ can do in your lives if you just let go and allow him to do it and give him a chance to work like he wants to work in your life. And all those times I look back when I should have died, I could have died, and didn't, I see in every picture I see God's hand. Yeah. And he put me here right in this chair, in this seat, for the purpose of talking to you that someone out there is struggling with something similar to mine, different mine, but are having the same thoughts, the same struggle. And just know that there is one answer and one answer alone, and it's Christ. And in him and through him, there is nothing. I'm talking nothing that is impossible. And I am living proof of that, not only from my story of where I came from and what I did, but my story of where I came from and what I did.
Yeah. Amen. Powerful.
And it is a blessing to be up here talking to you guys. And life's it's all about perception. And I'll give you a perfect example. 1990, we're in LA. I'm with the Philadelphia Phillies. I'm 21, 22 years old at the time, I think it is. The Dodgers are hitting, and there's a play at third base, and it is bang bang. It's close. And the umpire calls him out. Well, I'm talking out of the dugout. Tommy Lasorda just comes sprinting. Well, not sprinting, the waddle. Yeah. And he gets up to the umpire, and he is screaming, hollering, poking his fist, kicking dirt, throwing his hands up. He's looking at the crowd, getting them riled up, turns around, pokes the umpire in the chest, throws dirt on him, goes over the base, picks the base up, points at the base, puts it back in the dirt, kicks dirt on it, pokes at him again, and turns around and leaves. The umpire didn't throw him out. We're sitting there going, oh, what in the world just happened? Well, next day we get to the ballpark, and I get in there, and somebody comes and says, Jason, you're not going to believe this story. I said, what? He said, well, last night when the umpire didn't throw Tommy out, I went, yeah. He said, well, you know why he didn't throw him out? I go, no. He said, well, he talked to the umpire, and the umpire said, how am I going to throw a guy out when he comes out and all he's doing is screaming? That is the best call I've ever seen in my life. I can't believe you got it right. It was that close on this bag. You got it right in front of all these people. It's amazing. You're the best umpire I've ever seen. And he turned around and he walked off.
You're dispelling something that I think a lot of us believe. There's this misconception that if you're a professional athlete, life is perfect. You guys live on this cloud somewhere. You're all multi-billionaires, which is obviously not the case. No. That's, I think, with the media, or whatever we just grab from pro sports. But man, you were going through it. Like it seems like you were on the mountain, but the valley wasn't too far after that.
I was never really on a mountain. I was on an extremely small sliver of land high in the sky that I fell off of. That's the only way to describe it. Yeah, that's the thing about sports nowadays, and the problem, or what I did, I made that my God, that my idol, and lost track of everything else, including my family, including my relationship with my wife and my kids, and. When you do that long enough, your mind, you get jaded, there's arrogance, and then when that starts to fade and that starts to leave and that is gone, the damage you've done to your soul there's only one way to repair it. Yeah. And there's a lot of athletes now, and this is in every sport. There's a lot of businessmen that are in the business world that have high stress jobs, highly successful jobs, that once that's done, or that when that's gone, there's a hole inside them that you can't fill unless Christ comes in and becomes the center of that hole and fills it for you.
Amen. That's good.
Jason, connecting faith and sport, we had a lot of fun when you were telling a lot of the guys kind of your routine to playing the bigs for 22 years. The discipline that you had, going to the gym for a couple hours, after a game even, and you had this amazing, I think Nolan Ryan had an amazing routine as well, and that's what created his longevity and his consistency over such a long time. Tell us some ways, where we can all, when it comes to our faith, if there's some practices maybe that you've developed already, or maybe that we could just talk about regarding now in this new sport, if you will, sharing our faith. It's not, like as you said earlier, it's not easy. There is an adversary coming against us. There is a strong opponent. So if there's some.
Sure, there's there was a very regimented routine to everything that I did every day in order to get ready to perform at the level that I was performing at. And I would have nightmares about people outworking me and wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go straight to the gym and spend just about the entire day there because I thought somebody was doing more than I was doing, and I wasn't going to allow that to happen. And the only way that and everything was set at a certain time. I would get up at the same time. I would eat this at the same time. I would ride the bike. I would do my arm care. I would lift. I would throw. I would throw the same amount of throws in the same manner, the same way every day. And I'd get on the mound from the same spot. I'd breathe the same thing, thought the same thoughts. And it was just a constant repetition. And once you succeed in that little bubble and you have success, success breeds success. And then it becomes sort of automatic. And in my walk, in my faith, I found that if I have that same type of daily regimen where I wake up and the first thing I do in the morning is I sit down and I talk with God and I get into His Word and ask Him what His will for me is that day, just reveal it to me. And then throughout the day, it says to pray without ceasing. And I didn't really understand. I never really understood what that meant until I understood what that meant. I'll just say random prayers, and it might just be walking somebody, and something will come to my mind, and I'll just say, okay, I want to. I try to get into a habit when I'm driving, when people are passing me, when I'm passing them, I'll just shoot a quick prayer out for them, just in crossing, and they're just random people. But throughout the day, just try to stay in conversation and engaged. And I believe that's all prayer actually is just me talking to God. It's not necessarily me getting down on my knees and my head on the ground, spread out, and I'm just talking about being in His presence constantly. Yeah. And basically spending the day with Him, and at the end of the night thanking Him for that day and trying to figure out what I learned that day and how I can apply it to the next day and what God's got in store for me.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question, right? I want to ask one last question, which I don't know if you've ever been asked this before, but I'm thinking about it now as we're at the end of August, going into September 11th coming up. I was on my tractor yesterday cutting my grass, and I don't know what made me think of this, but I'm cutting the grass, and I was just thinking about, as I'm doing some work around the house, just thanking God for the blessings in my life, my family, my home, 4 healthy children. And I said it verbally to the Lord. I said, I don't really have many regrets in life, but one regret I have is that I never, in some formal capacity, served my country. And I can remember being 15 years old, being in history class and seeing the TVs and seeing those planes flying to those buildings. And in that moment at 15 years old, I said, I want to, join the military. And I was a kid, obviously, and some things changed over the course of the next few years, and I felt actually called into the ministry at 18. So I never had a chance to do that. That's always held a very special place in my heart. People who serve, just thankful for those people, and always a little bit of regret that I never actually did that. And I can remember, and baseball fans will remember this, that back then, that was a big deal around baseball. And I think baseball was delayed for a week, if I'm not mistaken, and they just shut games down. And you had already left New York at the time, right?
Yep, I was in Kansas City.
But you were in New York for a couple of years. You lived there, I'm sure, connected to the city. Can you just maybe give us a little insight to how that affected, because it's close to home here. I mean, 30 minutes west from here is New York City, and this community was rocked. And can you believe that was 18 years ago that happened? I mean, it feels like, I feel like I was in history class yesterday, as a kid, as a ninth grade freshman. But what did that do to you guys as professional athletes? Because I can remember a lot of athletes coming out around that time and saying, like, we're put on these pedestals. We're called heroes and stuff like that, but that put everything, you talk about perspective, I think that that was the one time in my life I remember baseball being put truly into perspective.
Yeah, it was, it was a tragic time. It was just the face of evil in its truest form. And in that tragedy, the stories of the men and women that were running to the scene to help, the guys that gave their lives in service of others. You think about heroes. Those are heroes, yeah. and the men and women in uniform, and the men and women that are in public service right now, the policemen, the firemen, the EMTs. Those guys are our everyday heroes. Yeah. And it showed in that moment and the moments following, and coming from a military background, and the don't tread on me, and in that moment there was such anger, and you wanted to lash out. And being a Christian, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, God's going to take care of it. God's going to take care of it. God's going to take care of it. But gosh, dog, I want to stop what I'm doing right now and join and go, But through that, the horror that it was, and the tragedy that it was, the way that it brought this country together, the way that it brought communities together, in times of tragedy, there's not a greater place in the world than the United States of America. Yep. There's not a greater city than New York City. And we are one nation under God, and I believe it's our job to get out there and this is our mission field. And I was talking with someone, I think I was talking with Q yesterday about this, about feeling overwhelmed at times about, God, I'm not doing enough. I need to be doing more. I need to be doing more. And, Q reminded me, he said, we have our community. We have our friends. We have our family. We have our network. Those are the people that we are to minister to talk to bring in. It's not the grand stage. It's not that. We have our communities, and if we have our communities and we work in our communities, there's so much we can do with the kingdom of Christ.
Well, I want to ask maybe Pastor Donnie to close and lay some hands on Jason in prayer. You began this conversation by saying that you were the first in your family line not to be in the military. But I think I'm going to correct that statement. I believe that moving forward, that you are a soldier of Jesus Christ, like Paul addresses Timothy. And I am, just like you are a warrior on the field, I truly believe that you have a long career season ahead of you, telling your story. I'm using your platform to tell a lot of people about the majesty of who God and Jesus Christ is.
Amen.
So, yeah.
Thank you.